So anyway, let's talk to Sarah Yon, if that's how I'm pronouncing it. She's from CatchPTSD.com. Sarah, I'm not gonna explain what you are, who you are. I'm gonna let you do that. So explain what you do and what you have to offer, and who you are, and give us your YouTube channel links and where people can find you.
Oh, sure. How lovely to meet you all. Absolutely fascinating. And also everything you're talking about in terms of, Mitch was talking about, predisposition in terms of it going back a long way before the military. Exactly. That's what I found. But just a quick start. So I'm a TV reporter by trade, and I was then taken by the military back in 2008, and they asked me to go on their exercises and help them learn how to deal with obstreperous reporters and how to make the media say what they wanted them to say rather than lies, basically. And so I spent a couple of years on exercise with the military, having come from the media world, but going around Bathurst and Battock and all the camps near where you guys are in Bath, and helping soldiers from privates up to brigadiers in how to deal with media coverage. And at the end of that time, they said, okay, we're deploying to Afghanistan now and you're coming too. And I was like, no. I was just here, doing what I could exercise wise. And they said, no, we're not going without you. You have to come with us. So I got taken hugely against PGHQ's wishes into Herrick 12. And I thought I was going to be in an HQ, sitting in an HQ advising the brigadier, but I was immediately sent on the ground as a combat camera person. And I was basically 45 years old, running at compounds behind soldiers. And I was immersed in an operational tour with absolutely no notice at all, which was fascinating, especially having come from a media background where you think you know what you're talking about and you realize that you're incredibly facile and most of what you don't actually know what you're talking about at all. But actually seeing a live operation on the ground, seeing how soldiers operate, how the military operates, and the very honourable intentions of our military, it was absolutely fascinating. And I did that, and then at the end of Herrick 12, everyone else went home and they said, no, you're going to Kabul, you're going to do another tour. And I was taken by NATO and ISAF to Kabul and was then put on the ground without the soldiers that I trusted, which was a bit freaky. And I again carried on as combat camera. So when I came back, going back into the media, it was almost impossible because I'd seen what you do. I'd seen what soldiers do. I'd seen how they lived. I'd seen the stresses from being bombed up and shot at, including me, but also just the nights out of bed and everything you have to do. And I'd seen, to be quite honest with some people, the start of those PTSD triggers that Mitch is talking about, where something had happened that had triggered things from the past. And so I decided I wanted to retrain. I retrained in clinical hypnotherapy, and I know hypnosis has a bad name, but I'd also at that time begun to notice that back in World War I and World War II, they were using hypnotherapy to help the worst cases coming back from the European front in World War II. There was an American military psychiatrist, John Watkins. And in World War I, after the Somme, they used clinical hypnotherapy to try to help the 24,000 guys who came back from the Somme with a guy called Dr. William Brown in Craig Lockhart Hospital in Scotland. And they were curing physical symptoms of PTSD, let alone psychological symptoms of PTSD, and in just a handful of sessions. So I was quite fascinated by that because a lot of my friends were suffering following those Iraqi and Afghan tours. And so I specialized in that. And I decided at the end of my training, and having read everything I could hoover up about what we were doing in World War I and World War II, and people might be interested to know that they were so aware of this predisposition that Mitch mentioned, and that I now understand that there is a predisposition to PTSD, and it is trauma, emotional trauma at a younger age that then gets triggered. That they were so aware of that in World War II that 1 million men got ruled out of the draft in the US from 1943 to 1945 because of this predisposition. And in the UK, they knew it too. And in 1939, they were told, do not send anyone to war who's got trauma in their lives. Now, everyone who knows who signs up for the military knows that everyone virtually comes with a bucket full of trauma. But they said, don't send them. And the British government ignored it. So I then decided that I would go to the military and say that we should be using these methods from World War One and World War Two now. And I pitched up because all the guys I'd mentored were now the heads of the military in Britain. The Vice Chief of Defence Staff, Sir Gordon Messenger, he was the one who sent me to Afghanistan. So I pitched up in his office because I could get in and said, I've got the answer to PTSD. He's like, yeah, all right, you're a TV reporter, go away. And I said, no, seriously, I have. And he said, well, do me a study. So I said, okay. And I went away and I took 10 guys off Facebook, the first 10 to respond, totally free study. And I said, right, I'm going to run this protocol on you that comes from World War One, World War Two, and let's see what happens. And the result is the free book that I have called The PTSD Solution, a military approach, which you can download online. And 8 of these 10 guys saw all symptoms disappear in 6 weeks. And the other 2, they also got huge benefit and they came back later, but they were a bit nervous. It was going to affect their new businesses. So they came back later. But there are 8 stories in this book. And so I went back to the military and said, I can do it. Look, these guys will come and talk to you. We can do this. And they were all like, for whatever reason. So, but at that point, even though the military were being difficult and saying we need to do a study and that's going to take 5 years. And meanwhile, my friends were committing suicide. And I said, no, look, we can't wait. And the charity picked me up, and a wonderful charity called Step Forward Charity in Manchester. And they said, okay, we'll pay you. And not very much. I think I charged £50 a session just to cover my costs. And they said, you treat as many as you can. Just pull them in, as many as you can treat a day. Just give us a bill on Friday. And I was like, really? And they said, yeah, soldiers, police, first responders, all of them. Just treat as many as you can. And I treated hundreds of people over the next 4 years until COVID took their funding away. And it was an open book for anyone who wanted to come and get treatment. It took about 6 sessions. It was exactly what they were doing in World War One and World War Two. And I literally just delivered what they'd done. And John and I were talking at the beginning, a little earlier before we came on air, about hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And it's worth noting that what I do is much more similar to what Mitch does in terms of going down to a level of spirituality, of consciousness, where you are virtually entering the ability to understand what went before, changing consciousness almost by using hypnotherapy. It's deep relaxation where you can't feel your arms, can't feel your legs, and you get served up memories that you didn't even know you had, or things that happened that you couldn't remember, and one of them will be the root cause of what happened. And it's not, sit there and cluck like a chicken and you're not asked to speak. I treat the SAS, I treat MI6, MI5, and they don't want to speak. They don't want to tell me anything. So I say, okay, don't tell me anything. You know what's wrong. I'll just take you into this state of deep relaxation and ask if your body will tell you what's wrong, and it does. So it's a very, very nice therapy. When you've done 10 years of talking to someone and it's not gone away, you can come and have hypnotherapy and lie down literally, and someone talks at you, tour guide Barbie talks at you and takes you to different places where you can access different memories. And I don't know how it works. It's magic. I have no idea how it works. All I do is deliver it and listen in awe as people see and hear and feel the most amazing things. And then they say, I'm done. All my symptoms have gone. I have no feelings, no worries at all anymore. And I have no flashbacks. I have no pain. I have no headaches. It's gone. And then I ring them every 6 months and say, really? They're like, yep, it's gone. It's not a coping mechanism, which I think can coping mechanisms and antidepressants can smother the cause. You really do have to find out why your body's reacting this way. I heard Mitch mention, I'll stop in 2 seconds, but I heard Mitch mention fight, flight and freeze. And I've seen through my clients that however you reacted to that first trauma is how you will react right the way through your life. So if you were getting beaten up at 3 and you ran and hid in the cupboard, you will have a flight response symptoms, which will be anxiety, depression, hypervigilance. If someone tried to beat you up at 3 and you turn around and punched them back, you will have fight symptoms for the rest of your life. It's a theme. and you will be angry and aggressive, perhaps tension, pain. And if something happened to you, I had a chap I was treating who was run over by a tank. And if something happened to you where you couldn't get away and you were stuck there, then your symptoms will be that when you go to enter something stressful, you just freeze. You can't step forward. I had a policeman that he couldn't get out of the police car to deal with any situation because his body just froze on him. And it came back to seeing someone drown when he was little and he couldn't do anything because he couldn't swim. And so he just frozen. So there's themes of PTSD, there's themes of symptoms. The symptoms always point to something specific, even though it doesn't. You're an archaeologist really trying to work it out. But it's a different form of treatment, but sometimes with different names. PTSD resolutions do the same as I do, I believe. And I believe there are other groups doing the same, just not calling it hypnotherapy. But for me, they called it hypnotherapy in World War I and World War II, so why not? I'm keeping the name and putting up with the criticism.
So where can the people find you? Where can they find your website? Where can they contact you if they're interested?
Well, I set up, because I was treating so many people, like 5 people a day, 7 days a week, I couldn't do it. So I started training other people. Some of those people I've trained are ex-military, ex-police who had PTSD, used hypnotherapy to clear it, and then are now practitioners. So I set up an international portal called CatchPTSD.com that you can see under my name. And on that portal, everybody has a full experience of trauma and knows how to deal with trauma and has generally experienced it themselves. And there's police on there and military as well. And it's worldwide. And people can go to that site, CatchPTSD.com, look up who takes their fancy, really, whether someone's got medical experience or military experience, or, and everybody works online. So you can pick one in Alabama, even if you live in Devon. And those people on there will keep their prices as low as possible, as feasible. Some do pro bono work. And the idea is that you don't have to shop around anymore for a therapist who understands what you've been through. I had a sniper come to me, and he's in my book. And the sniper said to me, the therapist was scared of me. She didn't believe what I'd done in life, and she was scared of me. So we created this portal, CatchPTSD.com, where you can go, you can meet everyone virtually. They've all got videos. You can listen to their recordings. You can see if you gel with someone. I've got my own business, which is thebeatretreat.com, and you can go there as well for resources and for information. But we are about 70, 80 people now on that portal and growing every day, all trained. You get the same treatment whoever you land with. So there's no, Russian roulette as to whether someone's a good one. If you want to download the book to read those 8 UK military personnel and how it worked for them and how it worked, what did the person do? What did they say? How did they do it? Then go to thebeatretreat.com/publications, and you can download that book for free, audio or print. And just to give you an idea of how it works, and also I have a podcast series on YouTube under the channel @CatchPTSD, and you can listen to me make PTSD understandable, and also not just, as Mitch was saying, not just for the people who are suffering, but the people who love someone who's suffering, because they are suffering PTSD as much as the poor person who's actually got it and doesn't understand it. So it's for people also that might join this show because their other half won't watch it, and just to understand what's going on in that person's head, because there's 2 people in there's not one. And those 2 people, and one of those people has all the switches and levers and can make the other one act in a very strange way. So that isn't always understood by kids and children and boyfriends and girlfriends.
Can I just interrupt a sec? I've put the website address into the chat a couple of times. I've also just found the YouTube channel and subscribed it. So if people can take a second out now and subscribe to the Catch PTSD YouTube channel, if you will, thank you. No, I'm not, unfortunately, Gerald, I can't make it. But thank you, everyone in the chat. Thank you, good evening. Don't forget, people, please share. Again, there's an email at the bottom of the screen there. If you're waiting for your prize or whatever, email us or message Darren, message me. Just get a message Lisa, whoever, so we can get them addresses. And before Christmas, we'll make sure we've sent everything out to everyone. But sorry,
I just want to tell you something. All the big prizes that were won have been sent out. It's just key rings and badges. But I do want a big shout out to Rory Hirbert. Rory Hirbert won the main prize, which was a night away at Norwell View Farm here, in a log cabin with a 1-star Michelin chef cooking for him. He has actually given that up and said we're going to re-raffle it for Christmas. So we are going to re-raffle it for Christmas. He said he couldn't make it. I did say to Rory, I said, how about giving it to one of your family members for Christmas as such and such? He said, look, what you guys are doing and John and Mitch and everybody else are doing, re-raffle it off for Christmas, because it's Joe and Dion's private business, which is separate to the camp, and they've offered a night stay in there with in the pod. It's got a jacuzzi and the 1-star Michelin chef, which is ex-forces from the RLC, same regiment as Lisa. We're going to come and cook for them. That offer still stands. We're going to re-raffle it off for Christmas. We're only looking for another 500 quid, and then we got another clubhouse, so we can get more veterans. We have me, Mike, Steve, Kev, 4 veterans living here permanently at the minute that don't have a home. So the camp does wonders here, and if anybody's struggling, or if you're watching that a veteran is struggling, or anybody else that's struggling, please get in contact with me, Mitch, or John, or Lisa. We are. And while Sarah's on, if anybody has any questions, guys, please feel free to put in the chat. John monitors the chat. He'll put them up on the screen. If there's any questions about a course, the course reminds me, or what she does, the program reminds me a little bit of the Spectrum Transition course. It's a bit of quantum physics, and it really does work. It's a really good course. It's helped a lot of veterans here. We had a veteran here that's hidden himself away and wouldn't come out. Since he'd done this course, he did 4 days. I think he did 8 sessions, and he's managed to come out of his shell, and he's actually socializing with the other veterans here. John, Mike, he goes into himself and stuff like that. Wait till you see him when you come this time. He's absolutely transformed. Can I
just say that we have a crisis. You can call anybody on Catch PTSD for free if you're in crisis, and they'll talk to you and they'll help you. And everybody's got free recordings and things on there for calming stress, finding the root cause. And on beatretreat.com, there's loads of self-help hypnotherapy recordings as well, that if you're feeling in crisis. So no one should ever, if anyone's ever feeling suicidal or really at the end of their tether, just call. No one's going to charge you anything. Everyone's going to help you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We do have an on-call rota here. Mitch is probably one of the most qualified, so we tend to send everyone to Mitch. Obviously, if Mitch is busy and he's not on call that night, maybe we can get him to ring your landline. Obviously, this show and this camp's all about networking and bringing people together. We're all here to help each other.
I do a virtual cocaine and virtual heroin program as well for free. So the body can trick you into thinking you've had it. So not for alcohol so much, because that's a coping mechanism. But if you're on drugs which are going to get you into trouble or taking all your money, you can get a recording which we'll make for you for free, and you listen to it, and it makes you feel like you've had the cocaine or you've had the heroin. And so
I'd be interested in that, because sometimes I do have a hiccups.
Or maybe I could do that for you, and you could try it, and then if it'll help anyone else.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And there's very different types of hypnosis as well, which is always a problem. That's why I set the portal up, because there's light hypnosis, there's just light where you're really on a conscious level and you're not going down into that very deep depths, which I think your course reaches. And so I found that people come to me all the time saying, I've had hypnosis, it didn't work, I couldn't go out, it couldn't knock me out, I didn't feel anything. And then in a couple of minutes with me, they can be gone, not because I'm brilliant at it, but because I shared some of their experiences. I shared their language, their vernacular. I understood. It's almost like the body goes, oh, she actually understands. Somebody has been through it with me. I've got tank commanders who are hypnotherapists. And if you've been in the military and you go to somebody like that, there's more chance that your body will accept what they're saying. So I totally agree with you. And we very much are aimed only at PTSD. That's why it's called Catch PTSD. We do civilians like you, because civilians, it's all coming from a long time ago. But there's different types of hypnosis, different types of hypnotherapy. And so we were hoping that even those like yourself, Mitch, where it didn't work, maybe this might be a different route and you might just enjoy it for stress relief. But one thing I would just like to say is that my belief is that PTSD is physics. Okay, and you were interesting that you were saying that something happened to you and it made you stronger and you went forward and you created something new, which I think is when you're a strong personality, and most people who enter the military are, they're very strong personality. When they hit a rock, they go round somehow and come out the other side. And I think the problem that PTSD is a dichotomy is that the strongest people will succumb to PTSD because they're the people who've hit the most traumas as they've come up through their life and then gone into the military and met more and more and more. And they're the toughest and they can pretty much overcome anything, which is why it's so shocking when something extra happens. It might not be even the worst thing, but something extra happens and it all falls apart inside. They feel like they're falling apart inside. And it's physics. Isaac Newton's laws of gravity said, if you pile enough on, this is paraphrasing, but if you pile enough on top of someone, they will eventually crack. And that, I think, is when that happens to such a strong person, it's such a shock. But it's often that the part we have, as we meet some, I think Mitch would agree with this, as we meet different traumas in life, that fight, flight, freeze response, as you said, Mitch, creates a kind of protection around the person. And I see that as an ego part. So we might have a part when we were 5 and we got beaten up by our stepfather, and we might have a part when we were 10 and we got bullied. And then we got a part when we were 18, when we were maybe in a firefight and we didn't think we were going to survive. And you end up in a situation where you've got all these parts rattling around inside of you like a Russian doll. And they have the ability to flick levers in you and switches and dials and ramp up your anger or ramp up your fear. And when you finally get to a point where you can't go forward anymore, and you might even, I've known school teachers just go catatonic because they can't take the stress anymore. When you get to that point, it isn't you that breaks. It's the part that says, right, that's it. That's enough. No more, don't go out there anymore, gives you OCD to try and control things, gives you claustrophobia to try and keep you on the sofa, or agoraphobia. And I think with hypnotherapy, what you're trying to do is explain to the parts inside the person, we know what you've been through, because the tough person has spent 25 years saying, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, I'm fine, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong. And he's not listening to any of these parts that are literally screaming for help. And so when everything stops dead, hypnotherapy, the reboot camp, any sort of spiritual introspection, which I know that a lot of soldiers turn to, anything that makes you stop and think, okay, where's this coming from? Where's it coming from? Where did it start? Why do I react this way? Why do I start screaming? Why don't I even remember screaming? And that is the ego parts inside you. And so my program, which is not mine, it comes from these guys from World War I and World War II, but it's to, right, we're going to go and ask these guys what's wrong. We're going to go and find the 18-year-old. What happened? How bad was it? Find the 10-year-old. How bad was it? Find the 5-year-old. How bad was it? And I haven't seen Mitch's book, but I imagine there's quite a bit of that in there, where you're looking for that first trauma that's set in motion this pattern of behaving. So if you do go and have a look at some of my explanatory short podcasts, in there I'm explaining that, where I'm saying, there's someone inside and he's hungry, he's fed up, not only with the world, but with you, because you haven't listened for the past 25 years. You just keep dragging him along. And one thing I would say for anyone who came out of a broken home or difficult background, difficult childhood, who had already made many of these parts inside of them, you drag them into basic training. Basic training is surely designed to exacerbate every single one of those parts that's sick of being told they're useless, they can't do anything well, they can't keep up with the others. And so I've treated people with PTSD from basic training. One of them was particularly badly treated in Marine basic training. But, sometimes just that constant ladling over the head can mean that a person can just lose it with life. And so I think my whole ethos of hypnotherapy is finding those ego parts. And that was what Jack Watkins did. And I don't know if you've read the book, Mitch, but the hypnotherapy of war neuroses, I'll send it to you because it's stunning. And anyone who wants it, ask me and I'll send it. And it just explains. And if you, just giving you a lovely story before I shut up, there was one of the guys in my book had lost his mother very early on, and he'd gone to a children's home, and he'd had an awful childhood. And he had a picture that his father had torn to shreds. And all he had was the picture of his mother's feet. And he so missed his mother, and he just wanted to know her. But all he had was a picture of her feet. And in hypnosis, he went through this 2-hour hypnosis session, and then he slept on afterwards, because many of my guys do. And in the dream, after the hypnosis session, that photo reassembled, and he could see a picture of his mother in his mind, in his dream. And he came out so happy. So sometimes when I say it's magic, it's like what he wanted was to see his mum. And the hypnosis gave him the ability to see his mother again. So it's bizarre, but it gave him what he wanted. So it's sometimes it's worth just trying a recording just to see if it makes you feel nice. As you say, Mitch, it doesn't work for everyone, but if it makes you feel nice and gives you nice information, insight, it's useful. I do think, like you say, sometimes people can go into a program, they've got enough ability to self-analyze and to discuss and take on new concepts, and sometimes they don't have any ability to even think. It's like they're lucky if they can reach for a bowl of cereal, you know. And sometimes the two sides of it, I think, are very important. I think it's also very important after, if you've used hypnotherapy to understand yourself better, then John was showing me the book that comes with your course, and I think that most of my people could do with going forward to something like that, so a little bit of extra support afterwards. Because even if they've had like some kind of light bulb moment where they've understood where it's all coming from, and then you go by, then, you know, you can't do that. You can't just leave them to try and clear up whatever as the, you know, the detritus of what was created along the way. So yes, I would 100% like to collaborate with you, Mitch, and I'll buy the books. I'd love to see it. And I think, you know, these camps like this, I've only had a little experience with going on veterans retreats, but I did go on a retreat in the Omani Desert with veterans and Portugal, and the value is so it's priceless. And to be back in an environment with military people who speak your language, you understand what you've been through. I mean, I don't think you can actually get through this without that. I don't think, and I was saying to John, you know, just walking back into a military camp 5 years after I was no longer with the military, it's like, oh, thank God, you know, normal people who've got some level of understanding. I can only imagine if you've been in 20 years and now you're no longer allowed in camp, even to go to the NAFI. It's like, or, you know, go to the DFAT. It's like, what do you mean I can't go in? I'm in the family.
Yeah. And I think that what part of what I talk about is people's identities are attached to that uniform. And just because the uniform is hanging up in the closet doesn't mean that that attachment is still there. And one of the biggest things I find that people who have 5, 10, 20 years, 30 years made it a career and come back into civilian life, they look like they have shell shock because they don't know how to separate and peel off that uniform that doesn't make a difference to civilians in society, because their rank doesn't make a difference, a medal doesn't make a difference. They're not looking for that. They want to know what you have to offer, and to try to separate those two, people loses their identity. I lost my identity after I was injured.
Absolutely. Because, and even I, who wasn't even in the military, but was like, I suppose I was a reservist in some form without a gun. But even I, at the end of the tour in Afghanistan, they flew me from Kandahar back to UK and said, bye. And that was it. And you know, that was like 3.5 years finished, and you're on your own and you don't belong anymore. And no one's going to, you know, talk to you about anything that happened or whatever. And it made me think, okay, I wasn't a real soldier, but it made me think, you know, how are the reservists managing that? How are territorials managing that? That they literally, 1 minute you're in Afghanistan, and I got attacked the night coming back, where I was RPG was fired at my Jackal and went underneath, and another one went over the top, and then it blew the 2 front wheels off with IEDs. And that was on the way to the airport. So we got home, got to the airport, got thrown on a plane, got thrown off in Bryce Norton, and was like, bye. I could still feel the the explosion going through me, and so I think, and that obviously is an extreme example, but I think just not being allowed on base, just not being part of that bar anymore, you're not going with those people anymore. It's destabilizing. It's like you lost everything, even if you still got a family at home. You've lost your reason for being.
Can I just interrupt there? Lodger, if you get in contact with us, give us a mail address. We'll send you some cards, some of our cards, yeah, Lodger. Yeah. But thank you very much, Lodger, one of my longest serving people who's watched my channel. He was one of probably the first 100 people who ever signed up to me. Sorry, Sarah, carry on, love, carry on.
Oh, no, that's far more important. No, I'm agreeing. And I mean, I can only imagine, Mitch, maybe people don't understand that you were injured, but were you injured and then in a military hospital and then you didn't go back into service?
I was injured in the military, but that didn't affect me as much as what I did in civilian life as a first responder. And I'll just leave it at that.
I would like to say something about police, because I think some of the people on here, I mean, fire service, oh my Lord, is all I have to say there. But the police, I found that a lot of my patients have said the biggest problem with being in the police is not only that you're on an endless tour that never ends and you're in the neighborhood and it's constant, but they were saying there's a different ethos in the police. Whereas if you were in a section and you don't like, number 5 in the section, but the minute you're in a firefight, you will all look out for each other. In the British police, they feel that everybody's against everybody else, and that they blackball each other, and there's bullying within the force, or it certainly appears to be. And they said, even just going in to be a first responder, which is a natural transition, they lost that feeling that this guy will save me whatever happens, and this guy potentially won't. And I think as a first responder, that's those poor ego parts, like you're making one every other day.
Well, and I think part of the problem is there's a reason for people to think like that, because I think that in some areas, I won't say names, but we'll say organizations, don't want people to be united, because when there's such a big force that's united, it creates a problem for what their agenda is. And their agenda is disunity, because it's easier to take care of people that are separate than them when they are together.
100%. I do worry personally. That's why they issue drugs, because NICE in the UK says no drugs as a first reaction to PTSD, but they just get dished out. And I think that when you get put on the drugs, your ability, certainly as an ex-service person or an ex-first responder, is diminished, because you're dissociated from the drug. Yeah. And I sit there and think, is that because all these people actually have the ability to band together? Better to keep them separate, better to keep them, disparate, so that they don't band together. I mean, it's a very conspiratorial thing to say, but I agree.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's why they don't care. I say to them, I said, when I went to them, I said, look, you could use this. I've got 40 British military and police hypnotherapists who can treat British military and police. And you don't even have to have me, this fake, strange military thing on the side. You can just have these 40. And I said, just take them. And nobody would charge more than $500 per person to treat someone. And you can use them, and they would not even speak to them. But these were former PTSD sufferers in the military who used this treatment and got better. And across all services. So I feel there's a huge push to not want people to get better, which is why your camp is so desperately needed. And the courses.
I think we need more of these camps all over the country. We need more of these